Good evening and welcome to this evening's virtual student fee forum. We really want to say thank you to our students who have joined us virtually this year. This is an annual event that we come to share the proposed fees for the upcoming academic year. And so it's really important to have our students engaged and a part of this process. So we're really grateful to have you joining us for today's virtual student fee forum. I am going to introduce Ben Lowenthal, who's our CFO and Vice President for Administration and Finance, to get our forum started.
Thank you, Dr. Hurt, and thank you to all the students who are joining us. As Dr. Hurt mentioned, we really look forward to this fee forum on an annual basis so that we can share strategies of the university as to fees in the upcoming fiscal year. I want to mention a couple things, and then we'll switch over to PowerPoint that we have prepared for this evening. Number one, I just want to thank all of the folks on the call here who all participated in formulating their proposals, all the fee owners, and those are the folks who you're looking at on the screen. So I appreciate all of those efforts. Number two, I want to point out that this is an unusual year, and the university definitely recognizes and appreciates the difficult times that we've all lived through together over the past year because of the pandemic. I want to remind everybody that for the current fiscal year of 21, the university system decided as a group not to raise any fees or tuition rates after the pandemic hit. And that was directly as a result of trying to help out the students and the families that we are educating today. And we appreciate the difficulties that we're all going through and appreciate very much that all of you as the students, and that is our primary focus, have stuck with us here at Towson University, and we intend to continue to do whatever we can to help you going forward as the pandemic hopefully comes to an end in the relatively near future. So with that, I would ask Brandon to share the PowerPoint that we prepared for this evening. I'm going to start out giving a general background on the university finances overall, and then more specifically focus on the fees. And as we get to each individual fee, I will then ask each of the fee owners to present on their individual fees. So thank you, Brandon. Go ahead to the first slide. What you're seeing here are the primary four budget categories that we have that comprise the entire university budget. The entire university budget is, I'll call it $500 million roughly, and we'll see more detail on the next slide. Essentially, it's made up of these four large categories, the first of which is the state assisted fund, and that includes the state appropriations, which is the money that we get from the state of Maryland to help support the university, the tuition and fees that we get, fall and spring semesters, summer and mini-semester overhead, and other indirect cost coverage from auxiliary, which we'll talk about as we move forward through this presentation, and a few other unrestricted funds. But the two primary focuses there in state assisted is the state appropriation amount and the tuition and fees that are coming in on a semesterly basis. Then we move to self-support, which includes things like sales and service of educational activities, things like small items sold to students, faculty, staff, the public. It's a smaller area of the overall budget. And then we have auxiliary, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, but things that we do at the university in order to improve student life. So things such as housing, dining, parking, university store, athletics, all of that is included in the auxiliary category. What's important to note about both the self-support and auxiliary areas is that they by definition are required to support themselves. So in self-support, you kind of see it in the name, and auxiliary, it's not there, but it is required that those activities are not in any way funded by state dollars. The state requires that those areas support themselves. So if they're spending money, then there has to be enough revenue brought in to match the expenses that those areas are producing. And lastly is the restricted area, and that is all about government-sponsored research. It's grants and contracts. It comes from federal, state, sometimes private. It includes a lot of our student financial aid as well. And all of that is restricted. There too, the revenues match the expenses. Generally, though, those revenues are coming from a grant area. So they're coming from whether it's federal, state, or private. Go to the next slide, please, Brandon. So the overall university revenues and expenditures in fiscal year 2021, which is the year we're experiencing right now, you see that the total revenues, as I said, slightly over $500 million, so $509 million. And you can see that most of that is comprised of those state assisted funds that I mentioned earlier, which again is the tuition and fees, as well as the state appropriation that we get on an annual basis. You can see the next largest area is auxiliary enterprises, then restricted, and then the smallest area is that self-support that I mentioned earlier. On the flip side are the expenditures. Now you may notice that the expenditures are 556 million, which is quite a bit more than 509 million. That is not what is normally shared with you at this forum. We generally have a balanced budget where we have the revenues that meet the expenses. The reason why they do not this year is because of COVID-19. And we have implemented a series of different cost savings actions that I've talked about at previous town halls and some of the communications out to the community, including hiring freeze, travel freeze, some across the board cuts to departments in terms of operating funds, and an effort to spend in terms of purchasing only what's absolutely essential. That plus some of the CARES money is helping us close this deficit. But you can see that most of the expenditures of the university come down to salaries. If you combine the regular salaries with the contingent salaries, it's actually more than 50%, basically 51.5% or so. And then we have scholarship money. We have other operating, which supports all the units across the university that support everything that we do behind the scenes. And then we have debt payments as well as supplies and equipment. That's just an overview of what the full Towson University budget looks like and is comprised of. Next slide. So now we're going to focus on the tuition and the mandatory fees. And as a way of background, we just want to explain to you what are auxiliary services and what do they do. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talked about that fund, the auxiliary piece of the budget, it provides essential services to the campus community. So Res Life, food service, bookstore, recreational facilities like Burdick, parking and transportation, shuttle service. And the primary purpose is to support all of you and make sure that the quality of life, primarily for students, of course, faculty and staff and alumni have opportunities to prize themselves of those services as well. But primarily what we're trying to do is give you the services you need to make life on campus as easy as possible so that you can focus on your education. Next slide. So how are they paid for? As I mentioned earlier, they're self-supporting. And those sources of revenue include student fees, what we're here to talk about, revenue from customers, if there's other sales, bonds, and oftentimes those bonds essentially are mortgages that pay for the buildings that are used in supporting the auxiliary services. So things like the union and Burdick and the like, and then some federal, state, and local grants as well. Key question here is how do we calculate these fees? And the answer is basically that, as I mentioned earlier, revenues have to equal expense. So we take a total budget that is required in order to get that auxiliary service functioning properly, and we project that both in operating and capital expenses, which I'll explain momentarily. And then we say, okay, if that's the total expense that we need to run this operation, we need to make sure that we have revenue to support it as it is required by the state. The point really being that we're only trying to cover our expenses. Expenses include things like staff. They include operating costs, utilities, supplies, and oftentimes they include payment on a debt or loan, like a facilities renewal project, like a union expansion, like Burdick project, things along those lines. Auxiliary services also pay an administrative overhead charge that supports the centrally provided service that enable them to do what they need to do in terms of service. So things like purchasing, payroll, public safety, all of those things are expenses that help out these services and make those services possible. So there's a small administrative overhead charge that's charged to each of these areas to cover those expenses, which is part of the overall operating cost. Operating and capital expense, two large categories. Essentially, the capital expense is the first bullet point you're seeing here, which is facilities. It's buildings and major equipment, things that need to be purchased for these different services to take place on campus. And then the operating expense is, what is the operational requirement? We have staff, we have to pay for the utilities, we have to pay for the fact that there are people working to make sure payroll happens on time, make sure that accounting is done appropriately, make sure that public safety is there to ensure campus safety and security. Some examples of the various auxiliary services that are available on campus for you: university store, dining, athletics, recreation, transportation and parking, Res Life, union, then auxiliary debt service, which has to do with the building specifically. And as I said earlier, essentially we take out mortgages to be able to pay for the expanding services in the buildings, and the buildings making sure that we have enough space to accommodate our growing student population. Next slide. So some of those services are supported by mandatory fees, and that's what we're going to talk about more specifically very soon. The auxiliary services fee, and that's the way you see it on your student bill, is actually split into two areas: a construction piece and a services piece, which I know that AVP Bob Campbell will discuss a little later. Athletics, technology, and then student services, which is your student government association, who I just want to say again, we appreciate their leadership and everything they do to act as liaison between us and the student body. Again, as I mentioned earlier, some of these have other sources of revenue, and we use those other sources of revenue to try to limit the increases to the fees. So we're going to move into more specific areas now. And I just want to remind everybody that we had a $0 increase, 0% increase in any of these fees last year. And with the cooperation of all the folks you're about to hear from, we are doing our best to keep the increases to a minimum. But the goal that we set out for everybody was to keep it to no more than an aggregate of a 4% increase. So it'll be slightly less than a 4% increase overall. And I'll review that at the end again. I'll now turn this over to Bob Campbell and Dr. Hurt to discuss the auxiliary services fee, which I mentioned before is made up of those two components. So Bob and Dr. Hurt, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Campbell. I'm the Associate Vice President for Financial Affairs and Auxiliary Services at Towson. And joining me in the presentation will also be Dr. Hurt, who also oversees the auxiliary services and the student affairs part of the campus. As Ben indicated, one of the fees that you'll see on your bill is what we call the auxiliary service fee. And the two components of that are the construction fee and then the services component. So I'm going to start with the construction fee. And as Ben indicated, it goes to pay our mortgage that we have for building auxiliary buildings on campus. So some of those buildings might be the Union expansion, which you see the construction going on now for, the Burdick expansion. These are what we call auxiliary buildings, where student fees go directly to pay the mortgage on those buildings that when we build them, and we have annual payments that we need to make on those buildings, as well as that there are ongoing operation costs for the maintenance and utilities of these buildings, and the auxiliary construction fee that you pay also goes to pay that. So those are the two main components of the auxiliary construction fee. For FY22, we're asking for a $33 increase, or 5.1% increase per semester on this construction fee for the full-time undergrad students. And then we're asking for a $3 per credit increase on part-time undergraduate and all graduate students. for next year. That again, that's per credit. So as you can see, we expect that with this increase, we would generate approximately $1.3 million from this increase. Our costs on construction related expenses are increasing $2.8 million. So we will fall a little bit short of what we need to cover all the debt service and everything with the new union coming on board, but we're going to have to make adjustments elsewhere. So we're not asking for, we're asking for the minimum amount we feel like we can ask for in terms of the increases on the construction fee, which is just around the 5.1% increase. That's a real time, not a real time, but a very recent picture of the University Union and its status. And Dr. Hurd, I didn't know if you wanted to speak about that a little bit.
Sure, thanks, Bob. As you probably know, the University Union Phase 1 will be completing this summer. And so we're looking forward to our students being able to utilize the renovated Union this coming fall. We'll have about 95% open. And so these are some of the features and some of the things that you can look forward to with the new union beginning in the fall semester again for the vast majority, and then we'll have the full renovation completed and ready for opening in fall of 2022. And so it's an exciting time as we prepare. I know many of our students have been able to see the growth and development of the new union and are excited about being able to utilize that space. We know it's going to have a really positive impact on student life, more space, programming space for our student organizations, and other elements that help enhance the student experience.
Great, and I do see some questions coming in. I guess our approach is going to be towards maybe during the end of the presentation, we're going to answer some of those questions. But I do see one of the questions was relative to about construction on campus. And as Ben said, there are two buckets of money. You know, the capital construction money and the operating dollars. And so I'm sure we'll address you know, how you can explain why we can't stop those projects, and those are actually separate buckets of money. The second part of the fee, so I mentioned the auxiliary construction fee. This is the auxiliary services fee, is the second part of the auxiliary fee you see on your bill. So the services support childcare, Bird Call, rec center, student activities, transportation services, you know, a variety of operations that you see listed here is what receives money from the student, from the auxiliary services service fee. For FY22, we're asking for a 3.7% increase in the fee, you know, $12 per semester for full-time students, and a 3.3 or $1 per credit for part-time undergraduate and graduate students. We're asking for a 3.3% increase on those students. As you can see, what we'll gain from that is about $500,000. And again, we're going to have costs that, you know, we're asking for that because our costs are actually going to increase you know, by, it looks like about 11 million or 1.1 million rather, I'm sorry. So we're going to have a deficit of 600,000. And again, we're asking for what we feel is the, you know, the most we can ask for in this situation of you. And we're trying to keep the costs down. So we're asking for a 3.7% increase on full-time and 3.3% increase on the part-time. When you put those two fees together, the auxiliary construction fee and the auxiliary services fee, when you look at your student bill, you'll see it listed as the auxiliary service fee. So it comes together as, when you put all together, a 4.6% increase overall when you combine those fees on the full-time students, and a 4.5% increase on the part-time basis. So just to try to explain that, as you look at your bill, you'll just see this one fee listed there.
And Bob, I'll just before we leave that feed, just wanted to share one additional note because I know it's been a topic of interest and concern for many of our students this year. One of the areas that have been impacted this year by the pandemic was student employment. Many of the departments who receive funding from the auxiliary service fee in particular do a great deal in terms of employing students. And so one of the priorities as we move into the upcoming year is to be able to restore as much of our student employment as possible. So I wanted to make sure to make that note, because I know that has been a topic of interest and concern for students in terms of the decrease in student employment opportunities that were available this year.
Thank you both for that. And then I would just add, in addressing at least partially some of the questions that Bob mentioned a little bit, and I've seen popping up as well, is that number one, I want to make sure that everyone recognizes that these are fee proposals for fiscal year 22, which will begin with July 1. First major semester will be fall 2021. And as we've shared both through communications as well as town hall, and I noticed recently the article in Tower Light, we are planning for a semester in fall 2021 where everyone returns. So things will be post-pandemic and hopefully mostly back to normal. And therefore, buildings will be used, services will be used. And we, of course, during the initial semester of the pandemic last fall, did do a 10% across the board reduction in these fees, given, again, the financial pressures and what everyone was experiencing. This semester, all of the activities supported by these fees are actually back in place. And so there is no reduction planned for that. And of course, next semester, we expect that everyone will be back on campus. As far as the buildings are concerned, the buildings that we actually expand or renovate, all included in a number of different areas, but pretty much in a master plan, as well as a planning process that we undertake with the state of Maryland, with the Board of Regents. And that plan is actually a 10-year plan. So when we start on any kind of building, rest assured there's been much discussion with all of the shared governance groups on campus, including the Student Government Association and the Grad Student Association. And once we start and get approval for a construction project, really very difficult to stop that in the middle. If we were to stop it in the middle, actually would most times possibly even double the cost, because you would have to stop and then start again, whatever that period of time later would be. And the contractors who work on this would have different personnel, would not be familiar with the plans in the building, and costs generally in construction do rise on a pretty consistent basis as well. So when you're paying these fees that are building buildings, and in many cases, I know another question that often arises is that, well, I personally will not be able to see or use that building because I might be graduating this May or a year out. And I just want to remind everybody that that's often the case. However, you are also getting benefit of many buildings that were renovated previously. So we're paying it forward. So if you're using Burdick, you may not have paid necessarily the fees that support Burdick, especially when we're doing that renovation. However, you're getting use for it now. And the same will be true of the union. And we'll have time hopefully at the end to also address additional questions. So with that, I am going to move to the athletics fee and welcome our athletic director, Tim Leonard.
All right. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Vernon. And hello, everyone. Thanks for having us on. You know, one of the great things about attending a traditional campus like Towson University is all of the various activities that take place on a campus, and they're very diverse. That's what makes going to a traditional campus a great experience, from the arts to club sports and all types of things. There's just so many different things that are a part of a university like this. And one of those things that's a hallmark of a great campus is a robust and broad-based athletics program. Here at Towson University, we're very pleased to offer 19 different sports at the NCAA Division I level. We have approximately 500 student athletes that compete here at Towson University, but the athletics department is much, much more than just those student athletes and staff that work in the department. The athletics department is a part of the bigger and broader campus and takes a co-curricular role. If you look at all of the ancillary activities that take place within an athletics department, that goes from kinesiology students who participate in our sports medicine athletics training programs, and this is allows them to complete their degrees in that area with the work that they're able to do here. We're involved with almost every college on this campus, from electronic media and film to journalism students to sports management students, journalism students, and many more. All are actively engaged in the athletics department as a part of their undergraduate experience and undergraduate learning. Moreover, the athletics department oftentimes serves as the engagement tool for the university. This is an area where, upon having games, and whether it's in Unitas Stadium or in CQ Arena, this is a great place for the community, for alums, as well as students to be actively engaged in the university. We take great pride in the work that our student athletes do. One of the things that we do at Towson University is make sure that our student athletes do their coursework, and we graduate our student athletes at a higher rate than any other Division I institution that's a part of the University System of Maryland. Additionally, it's a NCAA tracking mechanism called APR, Academic Progress Rate. We happen to have the highest overall department APR score in the University System of Maryland, and one of the better ones in the country. We've been recognized by the NCAA for not just our academic work, but also for the thousands of hours that our student athletes do in community service. Much of the community service that we do, along with some of the other programming, also led us to being recognized by the NCAA just last month, as the athletics department here at Towson University was recognized by the NCAA and MOA and received the Diversity and Inclusion Award that is annually awarded to one athletics department in Division I throughout the entire country. And this year it was Towson University. And that's something that we take great pride in. Having said that, we'll go to the next slide. What we come today is respectfully request a 3% increase in the athletic fee in our undergraduate students. This, as you can see in this slide, would represent a $400,000 increase to the budget. The reason we are asking for this is this was in our budget plans for FY21. We came to this group last year seeking this. And then obviously once the pandemic hit, not only was that reversed to be flat, and then obviously there was a refund issued in the spring and fall. Our hope is to be able to get the feedback to where we were, though the total revenue will still fall below where it has been previous, simply due to enrollment changes. So from that, we will still be in a position where budget cuts will be in place for FY22. And we're doing our best to make sure that we're responsible with that budget and that we are very respectful to the fact that this is a cost that affects the overall tuition and fee structure. The one thing I will say is that this athletic fee here at Towson University is one of the lowest in the university system of Maryland, as well as one of the lowest in the conference that we compete in, the Colonial Athletic Association. So again, this year, what we are requesting is a 3% increase, again, hoping to go back to where we were in FY21 prior to the elimination of the increases in student fees. And with that, that concludes my report. So Ben and Vernon, I'll give it back to you and answer any questions, I guess either at the end or whenever you would like me to do that.
Thank you, Tim. I think we should try to move through the remaining fees. We have about 5 or 6 still to cover, including the room, board, and parking. So if we limit our comments to about 3 minutes each or so, we'll allow for a few minutes at the end to answer questions. So I think we should move right on to technology fee. And Jeff, you can take it away and introduce yourself, and Matt.
Thank you, Ben, and welcome everybody. I'm Jeff Schmidt. I'm the Chief Information Officer from the Office of Technology Services, which is responsible for all technology on campus. And one of the areas that we're responsible for is covered under the student technology fee for delivering technology to the classroom and computer labs and different software products. I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to Matt Wine, who's the Director of Academic and Student Technology. Matt?
Thank you, Jeff. So in order to fit us into 3 minutes, I'm going to run us through this really quickly. What we have on the slide for you right now is a description of what the student technology fee does for the students of Towson University. In the first section, you're seeing examples of how we support the classroom foundation technologies. These are the integrated technologies that are in the podium of your classroom, the screens, and the computers that you use. And just for scale, you might be interested to know that there are 500 academic spaces that are supported by this program, and about 3,700 computers supported by the program. So the foundation of the program is fairly large. And each new academic building adds quite a bit. Included in that number is the new science complex, which is 80 new spaces and 110 new computers. It's a fantastic space, and we're really excited to support it. Also in the program is support for purchase and support of teaching and learning hardware, and I've included some examples in there that are kind of spread around the university, so hopefully you'll see yourself somewhere in those examples. The same for teaching and learning software and cloud services, and those are largely generally available stuff like LinkedIn Learning, which is a self-paced education program available to everybody on campus, but then also some things that are more specific to academic programs like StockTrack. Also supported by the program is the contract and labor costs it takes to partner with an outside company and support the classroom improvements and the classroom maintenance that goes on. And just as a side note, over this past year, the Student Technology Fees program was able to bring back in 226 student technology fee funded laptops in order to create the Student Laptop Loaner program, which many of you were able to take advantage of so that we could make the learning at a distance more successful. And the increase that we're proposing for this year is 3.8% from 106 to 110 for full-time students, and 11% increase, which sounds kind of dramatic, but it really is $9 to $10 per credit for part-time undergraduates and graduate students. And that increase is needed because of are increasing academic space inventory, increasing classroom technology functionality, increasing licensing commitments, cost of living increases for our staff, and vendor and labor cost increases. Now, if you guys want to learn more about this program, and I really encourage you to, go to towson.edu/CCLT, and there is an immense amount of information on there for you to read up on what the program supports and what you're getting out of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Matt, for trying to squeeze that in. Before we move to the SGA, I just want to quickly remind also that the rates increase by dollar increments. So sometimes when you see part-time rates increasing by what seems to be a larger percentage, keep in mind that that's a per credit amount instead of a full-time amount, and that the increase needs to be in dollar increments. And finally, that what we're trying to do is ensure that the part-time rate is very closely, if not exactly, matching the rate of the full-time rate, so that there's an equitable distribution of the amount paid across both part-time and full-time students. And with that, I'll turn it over to our wonderful student leaders who are joining us on this call to discuss the Student Government Association fee. I think the Gain is taking this, is that correct?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Degain Diong. I'm the president of the SGA. Just short and sweet, we're not increasing our fee this year for next year, but we do have the great pleasure of announcing that we have cleared our deficit. So while we do not know exactly what are the plans for the next year's administration, we are expecting an expansion in SGA programming and student support. The SGA budget is voted on annually, which is a process I'm going to let Jordan speak more on. Thank you.
So we know we were a little bit crunched for time, so we won't go into every line item presented in the SGA budget, but it is voted on annually by the Student Senate, and that's done in a public forum format. And if anyone's interested in how we allocate our funds and how students are supported by those line items, absolutely join us in the summer. During the summer retreat, we approve that budget, and students, you elect those representatives that then vote on it. So it really is in your hands how we spend that money. So yeah, we just wanted to go over that briefly, but yes, 0% increase.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Degain and Jordan, for your leadership. Appreciate it greatly. Now I'm just going to give you a little bit of information in terms of the history of mandatory fees. And really all I want to point out here is that if you go back to 2018, you can see that the increases were in the 4.5% to 5% or even more than 5% range. Since 2019, we have been spending a lot of time in ensuring that fees do not go up more than 4% on an annual basis. And you'll see that we've been pretty consistent with that in 2019 and 20. We will do so again this year. And then of course, remind you that in 2021, the university system jointly decided that we would not increase at all. So that's why there's more of a necessity, unfortunately, to increase a little bit going forward in order to, again, go back to the earlier discussion, make sure that these units are able to support themselves as is required. If you go to the next slide. And then this just shows that the total fees after discussing these proposed 22 rates come out to be a 3.9% or so increase, again, just below 4%. And given the fact that there was no increase over last year, if you consider that over 2 years, it's actually less than 2% annually for the years of 21 and 22. These are part-time rates. So just put that there again for your information as well. And now trying to move through this quickly so that we have some time at the end for questions and answers. I'll turn it over to Kelly Hoover from Res Life and Bob Campbell again for dining and parking proposed rate increases for fiscal year 2022.
Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to share a bit about what we're looking at for housing rates for fiscal year 22. So just want to initially point out here that what you're looking at in terms of these figures is the full year long rate. So this is essentially divided in half for the fall semester and the spring semester. So, but this is the total rate for the full academic year. And what we're looking at is a 2.5% increase of those housing rates from the fiscal year 20 rate. So as was mentioned earlier, all of our rates for fiscal year 21 remained flat from the fiscal year 20 rate. So this is essentially the same ask that we made in the fee forum last February when we met. And so we're just looking to be back to the place where we had proposed for fiscal year 21. I want to just share a little bit of context with regards to these figures and where the money goes. So the bulk of our revenue in Housing and Residence Life fall into three categories of in our budget. So that totals about 75% of our expenses. So about 35% of our expenses goes to debt. So this is like, think of this as like a mortgage on our newer buildings in West Village. So Carroll, Marshall, 35% of our revenue budget goes to paying down that debt of those buildings. About another 26% goes for maintenance and utilities of the facilities that we operate. And another 14% goes to our salaries and our student employment salaries. So these are really fixed costs that we are paying down with the revenue. The remaining 25% of our revenue budget goes to things like equipment, so furniture, new furniture that might be needed in residence halls, new appliances, et cetera, or improvements in the building, such as new carpeting or new flooring and that sort of thing. Residence Life programming also comes out of that last 25%, as well as contractual services such as our housekeeping contract. And we also help to fund the Baltimore College Town shuttle. And then we also pay for some other fixed charges. So these are things like supporting the Wi-Fi that is within the building. So we partner with our colleagues in OTS to support and improve the Wi-Fi in those buildings. So that's just a little bit of a idea of where that funding goes. For some additional context, we also expect that while our percent increase will be 2.5% for next academic year, we expect that some other USM schools may be raising their room rates upwards of 4%. So we feel good that we're falling much below that. We don't really like the idea of going much above this 2.5% increase. So I just wanted to share that context with you all. And I'll be happy to answer questions as we have time at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And moving into the board rates, I'll call on Bob to discuss this briefly.
Yes, so for FY22, we are asking for a variety of different increases in the board rates where we could. We held the board rate increase to 0, to the very minimum, of course. And then, in some cases, we are asking for a 4% increase. You can see in the one meal plan there. And just so you know that the main driver for our costs is what our dining service provider, their name is Chartwell's, charges us. So they're allowed to increase their prices to us by what's called, the consumer price index, which is at these levels. So because that cost is increasing, we feel like we have to pass that along in some cases, but where in other cases, we really want to try and hold it down. So we're making the increases 0% in certain cases.
Thank you, Bob. And I think you're going to continue with parking.
In the area of parking, we are asking for a $14 increase on the annual rate, and then a $8 increase on a semester rate. Those translate into 3.8% increases. And as indicated here, the major expense increases would be related to the labor costs of operating the parking operations, minimum wage increases. One of the biggest drivers for the additional costs occurring in parking that we need to asking for additional revenue to support.
Thank you to all of the panelists, and I appreciate you trying to keep it brief so that we now have questions for the time for questions and comments here. And I think at this point, Dr. Hurt, do you want to take it over? And I think Sean is going to share the comments or the questions with the panelists.
Yes, so Sean Welsh is going to be going through the questions. I know we have a number of questions and won't be able to get through all of the questions for the time allotted. We are going to go over the 6 o'clock hour so we can get as many questions as possible. But asking that Sean will be able to share the questions and at least probably able to categorize a lot of the questions for the panelists. So I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hurt. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Welsh. I'm the Interim Vice President for University Marketing and Communications. We do have a number of questions that have come in, and as Dr. Hurt alluded to, I think there are some that we could probably combine together to a degree based upon topic. One of the first questions we got in, other than the union, are there any other construction projects going on campus at this point in time? So we were discussing the construction fee fairly early on in the presentation, and I'll pass this one to Vice President Lowenthal. Other than the union, any other construction projects taking place on campus right now?
Sure, and thank you, Sean. And if you have had the opportunity to be on campus, you probably would have seen a number of construction areas. The union is right now, I'd say, the most active. Proud to say that we've just opened our new science complex. There's still some activity going on there. If you do any major construction project, there's some what we call punch lists with things that are not perfect, and we're getting them to be perfect, but the building is open. It's the building that you're seeing behind me. I encourage you, when you do come back on campus, to visit. It is a beautiful facility. We just recently also finished renovation of Glen Dining. So that is another area that, again, I'd encourage you to visit. You can dine in that area, and there's the beautiful view right through the glass windows, basically in the entire wall, facing into the Glen. And they did a very nice job on that as well. So there's that. In addition to that, there's construction ongoing north of campus in the buildings that we've recently either leased or purchased, and that is in 401 Washington, and we call Uptown Towson, as well as the Armory. It's going to be the home of our startup, a very exciting entrepreneurial endeavor that will help our students who are interested in entrepreneurship to pursue that. And the 401 Washington will be used for many of our folks on the administrative side, including some of the folks here in this call from the OTS area, technology, but many others moving in there that will free up space on campus for more educational purposes. There's also been some improvements in the athletics area, as I look at Tim, that we're very proud of as well in terms of the South Campus fields, practice fields for lacrosse and soccer, particularly for the women's teams, that are also very exciting.
Thank you. We have a couple comments in as well. There's one that is just simply a shout out to the technology department. The increase is justified there thanks to all the work through our Office of Technology. So a nice comment there. Another one that comes in regards to technology. My friends use Grammarly. Can that be covered with the bulk rate? It is very expensive. So that's one that I think we could probably put on the list of things for us to consider. But Grammarly is a popular tool that our students would like for us to consider. One of the earliest questions we got in, will there be an increase to financial aid for all students in response to the fee increases? So a question in regards to financial aid, Vice President Hurt or Vice President Lowenthal, if either of you would be able to give some level of input on any financial aid students might expect.
Sure, so I'm happy to get started, and Vice President Lowenthal, feel free to chime in. Really important question, as we do recognize the impact of the pandemic on our students and families. Certainly aren't able to speak specifically to individual students' financial aid packages, but I can share, as many students know, that we, have been recipient of stimulus funds, both at the state and federal levels. And so our top priority and strategy really has been as directed by the giver of those funds to really target supporting our students and recognizing the impact. And so we're going to continue to make that the top priority to be able to get those funds to support our students with particularly the greatest documented financial need. And so as we did this past year, we will continue to distribute those funds to, again, lessen the impact for our students. We've also been able to target much of those funds to be able to support emergency grants for students. We've had hundreds of students who have been recipients of grant funding from the emergency funds for, everything from meeting kind of life expenses to food insecurity challenges. And so we'll continue to leverage those dollars to, again, enhance the financial aid packages for our students with greatest need, but also have those emergency funds available as well. Ben, I don't know if you want to share any additional information.
Thank you, Vice President Hurt. That was very well stated. I will just add that many of you may be aware that there was a recent second stimulus, and that is probably what Vice President Hurt was mostly referring to, but there's also plans for a third stimulus that we are excited about. We've actually seen some preliminary numbers in terms of if that bill does get passed, and we feel, I would say, pretty optimistic that it will get passed. It's going to take a little time. What we're hearing is that the administration is trying to get this passed by mid-March, and we are already scenario planning that if we get those additional dollars, at much of those dollars, and certainly more than 50%, will be directed directly towards student financial aid, and try to help all of our students through this pandemic and get you in the best possible financial straits that you can be in, given everything that's been going on. So when that passes, we have some plans already, depending on, again, a lot of what the amount is, what the criteria are, but plans to spend that very much on our students in the area of financial aid. And that would be going into the fall of 21.
Thank you both for your responses there. A number of questions that have come in regards to the athletics fee. So Athletic Director Leonard, I'll pass a couple your way now. Will students ever see a refund for the athletic fee, considering we did not have athletics? I'm assuming they're talking about the fall, because of course we do have events underway now.
Yes, and so we do have all of our sports are here on campus, have been active and are in season now. The only one that is not having a competitive season is football, though they are having their normal spring season cycle. So all of those programs are up and competing as we speak. And what was the question? Are we ever going to get a refund? I do want to remind folks that there has been over 6 million, or just about $6 million in athletic fees that have been refunded to the students between last spring and this fall. So the university and the athletics department is very aware of the students' stance on that, and I do believe that we have been fairly generous on that. But yes, we are up and operational and playing games.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question in here in regards to for the sports that were being played, students were being prompted to pay for a streaming membership on top of all of the other fees that they're citing in this question. So could you address the access to the streaming service to be able to view Tigers athletics?
Yeah, sure. Our conference has a multimedia rights agreement with an entity called Flow Sports that provides a financial payment to the league, which then gets distributed out to all of its members. And in a normal year, yes, that would be correct, that anybody would want to get access to the Flow Sports, be able to watch our games as well as any of the other games in our conference and that Flow Sports offers. That would be the case. We have worked with Student Affairs and SGA to be able to provide free access for students. If they go in and log in, you can watch those games for free. And we have had a number of students who have taken advantage of that.
Thank you. Going to circle back to the Grammarly topic. I addressed it as more of a comment. There is a question there. Is that something that we can pursue, having Grammarly as an accessible tool for our students paid for by the university?
Yeah, I think what I would say is it is something that we will look into, and every year we have a IT planning process that we look at the student technology fee, and we work closely with academic affairs about what the right software products and classroom needs are. And we also work with some of the student organization, which I think include SGA, to talk about some of those things. So we will look into that.
Thank you. How much of the university's auxiliary fee goes toward the child center? Aren't the parents paying for their children to attend? So a question in regards to the auxiliary fee and the child care center. Mr. Campbell, is that one that you could answer in terms of the child care facility?
I don't have the exact number, but I will say that yes, parents do pay to have services at the child care center. But the fee also supports the child care center as well as a service that's available to all students. Students that utilize the child care center receive a reduced rate. If somebody's coming in from the outside, they pay a much different rate there. But in terms of the actual number, I don't have that information at my fingertips, but they do have both types of fee, both type of income, the student fee income, as well as what we call self-generated income. Ben, I didn't know if anybody else wanted to take a stab at that. Brandon?
I think you covered it well. And that is the concept, is that the portion that's coming from the fee that's charged to students directly subsidizing the amount that they would pay when taking advantage. And I know that we have quite a number of students who are bringing their children to the child care center.
Thank you. Some questions in terms of logistics in the process. Is there a way for students to formally oppose any fee proposals that have come forth today? So what the steps would look like for students who may want to voice opposition beyond asking questions in this forum. Vice Presidents Hurt or Lowenthal, if you could address that.
So, one of the things that we will do as a part of this forum is certainly collect all of the questions, all the comments that's been shared, and kind of take a look at that to see if there are areas where we can take a look at the proposal and make some adjustments where possible. And so we'll continue to take a look at the student feedback and really kind of honor that feedback where we can, because at the end of the day, we recognize the impact that the pandemic has had on our students, and we want to certainly be able to recognize those voices and respond where we're able to. I'll just say also that ultimately it's not Towson University's decision around how the fees will be set. The Board of Regents ultimately will have to review what's proposed and make a determination of whether or not those fees will be approved. And that's the case for any of the institutions within the USM. So that process would happen later this year in preparation for the upcoming academic year.
Thank you. A question in specific to our contract with our dining services with Chartwells. Will the contract with Chartwells be renegotiated when it ends? They're citing some concerns about the food service as well as the Chartwells relationships with their employees. So Vice President Lowenthal, is that one that you could address as it pertains to you being able to renegotiate or consider other dining services?
Yes, thank you. And I would ask Mr. Campbell to join in a moment, but I will address the fact that the Chartwells contract has very specific language about our treatment and their treatment of all of their employees. And we in the administration recognize many of the concerns that the SGA raised, and we appreciate the fact that they did raise it. And we are addressing and have been meeting regularly with Chartwells about those concerns. We will probably have some additional communication with everyone about some of the things that resulted from investigation and actions that have been taken going forward. But we took those very seriously and are very pleased that Chartwells did so as well. And there have been a number of changes that we believe will take care of the issues that were raised going forward. I would ask Bob to comment specifically on the contract and the expiration date and our ability to negotiate once it does expire. But we are always very careful to include very specific language about treatment of employees. And that actually goes as well to additional language that we've added related to how they treat the employees and discussions we've had during the pandemic. So the various testing criteria and how we are sure that they are securing the safety of all of their employees is consistent with what we are doing for all of our own employees. So we always ensure that all of our partners and third parties that are providing services are on the same page with us on those policies. Bob?
Thank you, Ben. Yes, our current service provider for dining services is Chartwells, and our contract with them is up on June 30th of 2023. So we would be looking to renegotiate or put out another, what we call put the service out for bid. That would probably take place, I would imagine, in 2022, maybe the fall of 2022, we would be doing that. And prior to doing that, we should be engaging the campus and seeking your input for what we need to be looking for in our next food service provider. So absolutely, we'll be renegotiating it, and we'll be engaging the campus, SGA, and other stakeholders across the campus for what our next service, food service provider, we're looking for in terms of what we'd like them to have. And then, with that, we would go out and we would bid the contract, and a new contractor would be in July 1 of 2023.
Thank you. I want to ask a follow-up actually to an earlier question that I shared from the Q&A, which was in regards to kind of the follow-up and what next steps are for students. And I failed to ask our SGA members who are on the call here for their input. They have been fierce advocates for their fellow students throughout the course of their administration this year. And I do want to cite all the work that they've done alongside our university administration. So DeGane or Jordan, if either of you would like to address what type of advocacy you all will be doing for students going forward, working with the university administration with any of these concerns.
I'll go ahead. We have open communication with the student body on our website. So if you ever have any concerns that you'd like to specifically address to members of the exec board, you can always go on the website and submit that concern directly, and we'll respond right back to you within 2 business days usually. Other than that, we are hearing your concerns, and we're also seeing your questions that are coming in, and we're taking note of them, and we're going to make sure to go ahead and further investigate and question these things for you if you're not getting the answers that you feel are appropriate right now.
And I can follow up a little bit on our legislative process this past year. If anyone's been following the course of SGA's engagement with the administration concerning student fees this year, we had resolution number 6, which came to our attention in I believe it was August or September, and that was just documentation that the students were not in support of the current allocation of funds concerning the athletics fee specifically. And I also just wanted to talk about the fact that while SGA doesn't have sole power to make these changes on our own, we are a part of a larger system of shared governance within the university, and we embrace having open conversations with other departments throughout the year so we can raise your concerns regularly. And all in all, legislation is an opportunity to document student concerns. So it would say that the students this year during the 2020-2021 school year felt this way, and the university chose to respond however they wished to respond, but it would be documented in a formal way. But yes, please email us as well, engage with us on social media, and we're always listening. So that was our piece.
Thank you both for those great answers. Thank you. A question in regards to parking. What have we done to improve parking on campus? And they cite the fees that we're looking to raise around parking in this forum here today. So what is being done to improve parking on campus? I'll go to Vice President Lowenthal and perhaps Mr. Campbell to address those.
Yes, thank you, Sean. And I will turn it over to AVP Campbell in a moment. I just want to remind everybody, and this is something that was taking place prior to the pandemic. We had a full parking study undertaken to look at parking across campus to specifically improve the parking service that our students and faculty and staff all deserve. And that is not just parking, it's really an overall study that also includes transportation. So the shuttle service and other options that really tie very closely to parking and the ability to get around on campus and off campus to where our students are living. All of that was part of the parking study. We had obviously some delays in terms of sharing that with the community. Now that we are getting at least somewhere we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, returning to normal in the fall, we are going to be scheduling and have already scheduled some forums with all of our shared governance groups to share the initial results of the parking study and some exciting, I think, recommendations and possibilities in terms of where we can go moving forward to improve parking on campus. And there will not be specific recommendations per se. It'll be sort of a menu of possible recommendations, and that's where we're looking for input from all of you who are most impacted by any changes so that we can decide based on your input what the best path forward is. And then I'll ask Bob to see if he has anything to add to that.
No, Ben, I think you covered it very well. The study is, I think, very comprehensive. It will include how we look and manage parking on the campus, as well as Ben said, the transportation, how we get people to and from the campus and then around the campus. It also will include some green, aspects to it as well. How can we improve our programs and services around being more green? So I think that it is going to be a good study. I look forward to sharing some of those details in the coming weeks with that.
Thank you both for your answers. A question in regards to housing, and AVP Hoover, I'll pass this your way, and perhaps Dr. Hurt, you could weigh in as well. Are there plans to partner with any off-campus housing facilities in places like University Village or Aspen in order to allow for financial aid to be used at those housing locations, which are quite expensive, as the question comes in?
So we did partner with Aspen Heights this academic year as we were facing a shortage of space for our residential population on campus due to the de-densification efforts that we wanted to be sure were in place to mitigate COVID-19. And so those students who leased at Aspen Heights, they actually, we have a number of floors that are directly contracted through our office through University Housing. And so students were able, if they contracted with us to live in Aspen Heights, to utilize their financial aid directly for those spaces. So we did do that this academic year. We're just getting into the process of starting to think about whether or not we want to renew that partnership with them for next academic year. Part of the decision making will be around the makeup of our housing for next academic year, whether or not we need to continue to provide isolation and quarantine spaces on campus, and the expected size of the incoming class and the expected number of contracts from our returning students to university housing. So should the demand kind of present itself, I think that we may look at continuing that partnership, but those conversations are very preliminary at this point in time and just starting to unfold. So more to come. But again, if a student were to live at Aspen Heights and have a contract with us, then their financial aid would apply in that situation.
Thank you. Another one looking a bit ahead, and we'll try our best not to speculate in response to any of these, but will fees be charged or be changed rather in the event where anybody is not able to be on campus in the fall? What would the process look like for the university and its students if for whatever reason in the fall we're not able to be on campus? Now, I will make the caveat there that we are planning to have a full on-campus experience in the fall. But Vice President Lowenthal or Vice President Hurt, if either of you would like to give a quick response to that as we try to get through a few more questions before 6:15.
Sure, and I would just say that we will cross that bridge when we get to it. We, as you said, Sean, do not like to speculate. As we say all the time, we follow the science. We're hopeful and very much optimistic that everyone will be able to come back in the fall and things will be back to normal. But there's no question that it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future, as I like to quote Yogi Berra. But we'll hope that we don't have to answer that question, but certainly if and when something like that were to occur, we would listen to feedback as we did back in the spring and the fall, beginning of the pandemic, from our Student Government Association and other shared governance groups and react accordingly.
Thank you. A question in regards to the vaccine, or any funds being spent by the university to help students receive the vaccine. Vice President Lowenthal, is that one that you could attempt to provide an answer to? And Dr. Hurt, if you could weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I would defer to Dr. Hurt. He's much more familiar with exactly what we're doing in those operations.
Sure. So I'll just share, we don't have any plans at this time to be a vaccination site. As a reminder, the governor has spelled out the phased distribution plan for vaccines. And so at this point, student employees are included as a part of that, but students in general are not at the point where they're a part of the distribution plan. We anticipate that'll probably be closer to late spring and the summer before that distribution plan is expanded. And so at this time, we don't have any plans of offering vaccinations on campus. However, we continue to work with the county, we continue to work with the state. And if that does change, we'll be sure to communicate that to the campus population.
Thank you. Before we wrap things up here, I do want to note we just dropped in the chat, and you all are free to copy paste this down, and we'll provide this wherever we can. Otherwise, after this call, but any questions we did not get to, or any questions that you have to ask after this call has concluded, can be sent to the university administration via asktu@towson.edu. or to the SGA via sga@towson.edu. And we also want to note there is a submission form at towsonsga.org. As we're up against it here at 6:15, I do want to hand things over to Vice President Hurt to just give a couple closing remarks to finish out today's session.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Just want to thank all of our students who joined us for this virtual student fee forum tonight. Your feedback, your questions, your perspective is really important as we continue to move forward as an institution. So please know that we're collecting all the questions, we're collecting the comments. Continue, if you have follow-up questions, to send those to asktu@towson.edu. And again, this process will continue to move forward, taking into account all the feedback that we've received today, and we'll continue to work with shared governance, including SGA, as we move our plans forward, ultimately to the Board of Regents for their decision on the fees. So thank you again for joining us this evening, and I hope you continue to have a successful semester.